You know who I love? My mom. You know what my mom loves? Flowers. Mother's Day is right around the corner, so let old gruesome Greggy help you out. Visit our advertiser, proflowers.com right now and get your mom some flowers. 100 blooms for $19.99, actually. Don't do that thing where you put it off. Mother's Day will be here before you know it, and then you're just going to screw it up if you wait. How do I know? I used to do the same thing all the time, man. You say you'll do it later, then bam, it's Mother's Day. You have a cheese pizza, 100 problems that could have been solved with 100 blooms. You get me, Kevin? You let her down. You cheese pizza eater, Kevin. You let her down. And now she's got a tattoo that says she hates you. The only way to stop that horrible future and get 100 blooms for your mother with a free glass vase is starting on $19.99 is by visiting proflowers.com. Use the code Greggy. That's proflowers.com, code Greggy. When you click on the little microphone, order today or you will be a cheese pizza eating disappointment to your mother, you piece of garbage.
Slightly connected, but I was conscious of this stuff when I was building games and when I started with like Abe's Odyssey. And one of the things that I thought, having gone through some really rough periods in life at different times and knowing how easy it is to make dumb, really bad decisions for your whole life, right? And prison's full of these people, right? And so I was like, why do we have 3 fails? So let's say it was set by sort of a Nintendo model, which really came out of a coin-op model, and I'm not talking Nintendo. But why, after 3 fails, are you penalizing me back further? I'm obviously not that good, but you're penalizing me more heavily because I'm not that good. I was looking at that, and I was like, psychologically, that's a really negative ratio, right? And so what if we just said infinite lives? Just keep on. I mean, we were cognitively, consciously focused on this as a problem. Like, if I feel like I might have a chance to do it and I keep on doing it, I don't have a computer telling me increasingly like a teacher would, you suck at this, why don't you just try something else, right? Instead, if I'm having fun, I can keep on trying. 500th time I succeed. If I had the will to do that, now I'm a winner. Right?
Well, you overcame.
But I wasn't told along the way, you suck, why are you even playing this game? Which is the subtext of 3 tries, get back to the square one.
Sure.
Right? And those are like, we were thinking about those things. It's like, how do you make someone feel more like a winner when they might be, experiencing what a lot of us feel at different times, even no matter what spectrum you're on, like a loser. Right?
That's very fascinating because you look at how the world is built up, right? We're built to get those quick successes. We're not really geared, like you're right, a lot of things in our life don't gear us toward what real progress and success is in real life, right? And to me, and maybe your definition of this is different, but when I look at, for instance, what we're doing here, or I look at what we're doing in my relationship, right? It's hard to gauge progress while you're in the middle of it. Like, you don't really see real progress until you're maybe 2 years down the road, or in my case with my wife, 5 years, 10 years down the road. And I look back and go, holy crap, we have a great relationship. But we're not really ever told that, or at least I wasn't told that, like, that real progress comes with grinding a little by little every day until and it's not even about fail, succeed, fail, succeed. It's about try. Oh, that worked. Try. Oh, that worked. And you don't. And like, and these things that are incredibly important in life, I really feel like they don't come to you in a week. They don't come to you in a day. You don't have the aha moment. You just all of a sudden you work at it, and after a year or two, you're like, oh, I guess I've achieved that. I guess we're there, but you don't really know because you're already on to sort of the next level. And it's not even a thorn in
your side anymore to be like, oh, okay, I'll just put that I'll just not comment on that right now, but I really have the right to, Yeah, but, right. I guess everyone else doesn't want me to comment. Like, that's an easy phase to go through too. Well, I'll just behave, but everyone's wrong. Yeah, right, and then you're just deepening in your own funk again with a better behavior.
Right, that's the thing. It's a mindset change, right? Yeah, you got to change your mind. Yeah. You got to change where your head's at.
Well, I equate this, like, I talk about movies a lot, right? Yeah. And what are we taught in movies? All right, we're taught in movies that every single thing that we need every problem we have can be overcome in 2 to 2.5 hours, right? Yeah. And we're raised on that. I was raised on in the 80s. There wasn't anything that I couldn't, in 2.5 hours, watch someone go from complete fucking deficit to, I'm awesome, now everything's happy-go-lucky, and we have these happy endings, right? And so, do you think it's weird that when we can't solve those problems for ourselves in 2.5 hours, we feel like assholes that are losers? I mean, that's
always the roughest thing, right? When you're talking about how
it's almost a test for gaming.
It's like, an interconnection thing of relationships, of like when you get to that point in a relationship, whether it's a friendship or a romantic relationship or your parents or whatever, where it's just you've all said your piece, and then there's just that awkward thing of just like,
we didn't resolve this.
well, this is not resolved, but this is what it is. This is reality. And what do you do with this information?
Right. I mean, what's cool about that is when you look back on it, there's so many times where you know exactly what you believe, and you're like, I'm right. Like this is, I stand by this, and there's nothing that can change my mind. And even when your friends are around you telling you, hey, you're like, you should think about this differently. I think you're wrong. Here's why, whatever. You're like, no, what the fuck? Shut up. And then years later, you can look back and be like, they were totally right. I was so wrong.
Oh, yeah.
And it's those moments when you stop and reflect on what you've done and how you've changed that at any moment, as bad as things are, if you're like, fuck, this can't be fixed, it can. And in a couple of years, you can look back on it and be like, holy shit, I can't believe where I'm at now because I remember feeling hopeless at this point.
Yep. And that's the big thing I always take away from when I talk to somebody when I write a letter about suicide, or when I talk to, on the rare occasion I've talked to somebody who was at the pinnacle or at the precipice of thinking about this. It's the fact that anybody I've ever heard from who survives the suicide attempt or whatever is always like, yeah, it's better. That was not the decision I should have made at that point. You know what I mean? The people who you talk, and I'm sure, don't get me wrong, there's people who try to commit suicide again and succeed that time, so clearly whatever. But I'm talking about years removed from the problem.
Sure.
You know what I mean? I made a joke somewhere on, I don't even know, but like that song of if you're going through hell, keep on going, right? Like you just gotta bite down and get through it, and that's fucking tough. And when it's fucking horrible, like, how do you do that? You have nowhere to look, and maybe there's no money, or you're out on the street, and da da da. Like, I understand like where desperation comes into, but then it is that weird thing of people who, I'm not gonna say, for me, right? I think thinking of suicide every so often is natural. I'm like to the point of like, I'm gonna use those pills and I'm gonna do this and I'm doing it tomorrow night. I don't mean that thing, but I mean
some level of saying I need to escape whatever's happening.
And running hypotheticals or whatever of like what would push me to that point and blah blah. And like for me, I think about like everything's fucked. You know what I mean? And like, so I have no family to go to. I have no friends to go to. The business has failed. I'm out on the streets. I'm all alone. Like that. Like it. Even then, if I'm homeless and I'm thinking of that, I'm trying to think of like what would push me to that point. So for me to think of that far down the line and not be able to do it, that's what's so heartbreaking of people who have good friends and good families and all these things, but one thing is so off that they're thinking this is the only way to do it when they have a job and maybe they don't love the job. You know what I mean? Like, it's not to the point of like, that's just how different we're all wired. Yeah. That I, like, for me to stop and think about like how far down this horrible timeline, alternative timeline where I would actually think about killing myself. What does that take? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, there's a good Netflix comedy special by Neil Brennan, who was one of the guys that wrote the Chappelle Show. He talks a lot about that, right? And what he talks about is that he's been depressed for the vast majority of his life, and that a lot of people are like, how could you possibly be depressed? You're writing on the Chappelle Show. Right, you're writing on, this is back, of course, like 10 years ago, whenever the Chappelle Show was on.
Sure.
Of like, you're writing the number one show on TV right now. Like, everyone loves this. This is amazing. You've hit this level of success that everyone has fantasized about. When I hit that success, then I'll be happy, of course, right? But he goes, no, I've been dealing with depression for so long that I don't even know what happy is.
Yeah.
And he goes, and the number one thing I always see in my friends, even if they're not willing to admit it or they've flat out said it, is they're like, why don't you just be happy? And he's like, if I could, I would. Right?
Yeah.
Like, if that was like, don't you think I would if I could? But I can't, because there's something that either medical science or I don't have the tools to figure this out. No one has the tools to figure this out. So I just have to be in this world. And of course, he's contemplated suicide. Of course, he's been on those dark paths, right? And luckily, unfortunately, he's had people or circumstances have pulled him through that. You talk about if you're going through hell, keep on going through. My touchstone is always the Dark Knight, right? Like, it's always darkest before the dawn, right? And I know I don't want to boil it. I hate boiling down complex issues like that to
cliches. But I mean, like, there's something to it, right?
There is something to it.
When you're
this is a personal case, right? Sure. Like, whatever. People grew up worse. You know, there's lots of issues, but at a certain phase, and it wasn't all that long ago. It was after people would have thought I was really successful, right? And I just, man, it was like facing every day. It was like, I just don't want to fucking do it.
Yeah.
And so I finally took a step, and I grew up. I was born in '65, right? So it was like more macho era, East Coast.
Yeah, you didn't talk about your feelings.
No way.
No way,
you don't need
man.
Feelings.
You're a man.
Depression was something for wimps to admit. Like,
Sure.
you would never add up to that. And I remember, had a great partner, right? And we're not married, but we might as well be. But I married my business partner, basically. And so it was like we had been working together for years before it became something else. And it was like, at that point, she was CEO, so there was no issues about giving me shit on my stuff, right? And so I got that in spades, but and so did she. So, but it helped us each evolve. But what happened to me was I got into a zone where I realized I couldn't see the good in almost anything, and I would wake up every day with this feeling that as soon as I started thinking about the things that I was too much focused on, I would just feel these total knots just build up my stomach. I'd be like, can't take it. And seriously thinking about all the wrong things. And then I said, so finally I admit, I'll try a med, right? Like I'll try it because I know what I'm seeing is not reality. I know, and I can sit down here and I can make a list and I can measure all this stuff and it's not that bad. What the hell is wrong with me, right? And so I went on a medication for a year. And I think it was Zoloft.
Okay.
And I didn't like how I felt.
Yeah, a lot of people say that.
But this was the value. The value was tremendous, and it affected my life hugely. While I was on it, I was just like, wow, I don't wake up with that feeling. Now, as it was explained to me from the person who gave me the prescription and stuff, was like, this is what it's doing. It's shutting off these certain receptors in the brain so they can't overfire, and it's doing this over here. So you're not going to get, your dreams are going to change. I was like, my dreams are going to change. Yeah, your dreams are going to change. Like, tell me all this stuff. I was like, well, I'll give it a shot, and there's some other side effects that was part of why I didn't like it. But what I found was I was able to live a year for the first time in my life. The first time in my life, you live for a year without having an overreaction in my brain, right? Without like extrapolating on, we got a flat tire, but that means we're not going to get home and there's a snowstorm.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like no matter what, you got a flat tire. It doesn't mean you're not going to get home, but all of a sudden you're living in, we're not going to get home.
Right.
Worst case scenario.
Worst case scenario.
Yeah,
dominoes are falling. Here we go.
Dominoes are falling, and the stack is getting higher, and eventually you're overwhelmed. And there's a lot of me-isms in there but for whatever reason, for that year, I didn't have that experience. And I got to the end of the year, and I went, you know what? I think now I can identify, because I've had a year without that feeling that I've lived with from day one, like right out of the chute, right? It was always there, and then different events made it worse or not. But you're like, if you can measure all this list and feel this way, something's wrong. You got to get some help, basically. Yeah. And the help I needed, I mean, I live with someone who's got a psychology degree from USC, and that's maybe a little too much help at times. But
dial the help back, honey.
But it's been priceless in all the great ways.
Sure.
As challenging as that, as you get challenged when you're with smart people that care about you, care about themselves, and aren't going to take your shit. You're going to be challenged. And but the ability, if you're feeling this way, like part of it is brain science. We don't understand. The brain's a machine. You're like driving a car and you don't realize you don't have reverse. Like you'll realize like something in you is kind of missing, or you've been programmed to reprocess information in certain ways where it's always a panic or it's always an anxiety, and anxiety is terrible, right? It leads people to all kinds of crazy decisions. But just taking that time and going on for a while and then coming off, when I came off, I could go, wow, here it comes, but I know it's not real. And then I was able to process it differently, right? I was able to completely process it differently and have a whole different outlook on life, quite frankly.
That's fascinating, because I have known so many people who are like, I know I'm struggling with this mental issue, but I don't want to do pills because I don't want it to change
and
me.
you just, you think like I came out of a more macho culture, where you're thinking like, I got to deal with this. If I can't deal with this, what good am I in? Which is just worse. Yeah. As opposed to just facing up and going, maybe there's something that I actually need some help with.
Sure.
I'm not.
And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong asking for help.
Yeah. I mean, I see this a lot, and this is one of the reasons. Like I've been seeing a cognitive behavioral therapist lately because I started having claustrophobic panic attacks. And I say claustrophobic panic attacks, but I think they're more anxiety-induced attacks based on certain situations. It's one of the reasons why I do jiu-jitsu right now is because that is actually therapy for that. That
makes sense. Yeah.
It's a very real-world way of reconditioning your brain, and a lot of it is prior conditioning that I didn't realize was happening over the span of the 36 odd years that I'd been alive. Right. Yeah. I don't want to trace it back to any root problems, but there's been you're affected more than you understand, or more than you maybe consciously realize by your environment. Right. And your environment is a lot of physical things, but a lot of people that are around you, and they're affecting you in a way. your parents are two very big reasons why you are who you are. And if you grow up with a parent that is overly risk averse, that's always telling you if you get that flat tire, it will lead to the end of the world. Right. Once you are constantly put in those high stress situations, it's not beyond the realm of like understanding that your brain's gonna fucking auto fire like that all the time and lead you to that. What in my case happened to be panic attacks where I literally started like the walls would close and I'd start losing my vision and my heart would beat so fast that I thought I'd have to pass out. There are more times than I care to admit, even in jiu-jitsu to this day, where I still have to go outside and like take a breath.
Yeah.
But it's getting better. And I will say, to your point, like the most important step is actually, believe it or not, the easiest step in dealing with any of these things. It's that whatever the simplest possible thing you think you could do right now is, do it. It's that quick little first step, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's Googling the number for someone who can help you. You don't have to call them. You don't have to think through that process. Just whatever, boil it down to whatever that very simple thing is you can do, and do it today. And then just allow yourself to take that process and don't try to deal with these hulking, like this is the number one problem I see with people who are trying to deal with anxiety disorders, or even like, and I've dealt with weight loss issues, things like that in the past, is that you always assume you have to do everything and everything has to be done by tomorrow. You have to solve this problem right now, because if not, you're not a man, or you're weak or whatever. That's not how real progress happens. It's not. It happens little by little tiny steps that lead you forward, and that's how it goes. If you're the harder the fight, the longer it's going to take. So just understand that and realize that you owe it to yourself to take that first step. Call that doctor, talk to that friend, whoever you can trust, have a conversation with someone. Even honestly, just Googling things every once in a while, Googling a doctor's number, seeing other people on Reddit or forums that have dealt with this can be very therapeutic. So to take those steps.
And there's value in it, just to add. I don't know if I'm screwing up your time.
Son of a bitch. We invited you here.
She's making me feel this small, man. Where's my...
Have another Red Bull. Let's go.
Bye.
Go, Lauren.
There's also the huge value in failure, right?
That's true.
People say this, and I used to watch business people say this, and I'd be like, "That's just such bullshit."
Fail fast.
Man, look at this guy.
We gotta fail fast.
I'm totally about failing fast.
Sure.
Fail fast, fail cheap now, right? We canceled 2 projects in the last year. We never announced them, right? It was like, I feel great about it. And I was like, we're winning. And they were like, we just canceled. I was like, I know, but look how little we spent to figure out
we figured it
that
out.
we should. Not 3 years in, right? This stuff, it was never announced. But so when you don't fail, here's what happens. And this is what I think happens. And we see this with different personalities, right? We're all fans of Steve Jobs, most of us in the tech, right? But Steve Jobs was a real asshole. And you can ask his family and they'll tell you all about it, right? But and part of the reason is all those successes. Now, he had failures that shaped it. And then when he came back, he was better, right? Like that makes you process something. I look at certain figures that were heroes of mine, like total heroes of mine. George Lucas, right? Went through really hard times, almost died during Empire Strikes Back, the fights with American Graffiti, like, reading the biography, you're like, wow, surviving the car accidents, all this stuff. But all that success, talked to his ex-wife. Not that I have, but I've heard cases, right?
Yeah.
And so all those successes, you start believing that all my characteristics are attributes to my success. It's because of this, like James Cameron, people will work with James Cameron in LA, but no one really wants to.
No, they don't want to.
Right? Because he's just like, I can put you through hell, right? It's not other people, Steven Spielberg, they'll work with him in a second. Gets an equally amazing job on the screen, but he's not berating everyone and driving them into the ground and making his ego more important than everyone else on the set. So the failure, I think, forces you to sort of study your own character in the humiliating ways, right? And they're embarrassing at times. What I found was that if I felt I had to represent things that weren't entirely true, personally, whether you're dealing with a large organization, you're employing lots of people, and you have an HR mandate, you got California labor law, you can't be honest with people. You start finding yourself in these higher anxiety zones. You're launching a new console. You got you can't say this, you got to say that. You feel like your software might be more shaky, but if you don't do this deal, you're going to go out of business, and all these people you got to tell they're not going to have it. So you got to tenacity of pulling it off. But when you're in a position where you can't really be honest, which is probably, most politicians, most business leaders of public companies, all these types of things, you wind up with these higher anxiety ratios because exposure, I think, humility to exposure, and what that will do to your ego is like, devastating, right? No one wants to be identified as full shit. No one wants to be identified as a con person, as a liar, as any of these things. And those things weigh really heavy on you, right? So Larry Ellison, another guy, it seems like he'll never be happy because Bill Gates is still richer, even though he's number 2 in the world. Like, what would some good, healthy failures have done to shape that attitude into someone who's more empathetic, more compassionate, more grateful for what they have,
Yeah.
And
but
then
would that person still be number 2?
I really don't know.
That's always a problem.
I mean, when you're into like, how do you get to be number 1? No one's winning the Olympics because they just liked the sport.
Right. That's true.
Right. Like,
it's using those past failures to drive you somehow.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching. You can. Oh, no, that's the wrong hand. Thanks for watching. You can click here to subscribe. You can click here to go to Patreon. You can click here to watch something Kevin wants you to watch, and then do something. What's this one? I don't remember.
Behind the chair. You're behind the chair.
It's a face.
People can't see where you're clicking.
Click on my face. To subscribe. I already said subscribe.
Oh, I don't know.
Click on the water
Just there's
bottle.
things here. Click on
If you
them.
want to go to the Easter egg website. Spoilers. It's just going to be a subscribe.
I can't even hear him.